One of my other mentors, Perry Marshall, he was quite adamant. He said, run into the chaos. And I think that was a good message for real estate agents as well, because in running into the chaos and helping other people, generally you're going to come out the other side okay.
You're listening to Elevate, the official podcast of Elite Agent for real estate industry, sales professionals, property managers and leaders. We bring you the best minds in business and real estate to help you list more, sell more and elevate your results. To download your written action guide from this podcast containing extra tips, links and shortcuts, visit eliteagentelevate.com. Now, here is your host, Samantha Mclean.
Welcome to another episode of the Elevate podcast, today with a little bit of a difference. If you checked in a couple of weeks ago to listen to our podcast editor, Kerry Green, talking about podcasting being the new blogging, you might remember a technique he talked about being an episode swap. And this is exactly what this episode is. Recently, I was invited onto a video podcast hosted by Sadhna Smiles. Most of you will know Sadhna. She's the CEO of Property Management for Harcourts International. And prior to this, she was the CEO for Harcourts Victoria. She's passionate about the issues of violence against women and diverse gender equality and has won several awards throughout her career, including Victoria Telstra Businesswoman of the Year. So in this podcast, the tables are turned on me, and Sadhna and I chat about the impact of COVID-19 on Elite Agent, why you need to run into the chaos, trends post-COVID, the concept of businesses without borders, looking at Gen Z for clues as to what the future of real estate might be, plus some tips on how to get featured in your local paper, plus much more. The links to Sadhna's show, called Without Edges, and of course the resources mentioned in this show, are in the detailed action guide attached to this podcast. I hope you enjoy my chat with Sadhna Smiles.
With me today is the wonderful Samantha Mclean. She is the managing editor of Elite Agent, host of the Elevate podcast, and a very well-known industry commentator. She spends her entire time interviewing other people. And Samantha, today we're putting you in the hot seat. Welcome. How are you?
I'm nervous.
Oh, God.
The one asking the questions.
I know. Now, I want to start with, I think it's a very common conversation, but every business has had a very or slightly different experience, is how has your business come through COVID? And the second part of this, which I'll talk to a bit later, is the changes that you're starting to do in your business in what we're terming the new normal.
So COVID was a really interesting time for us because obviously when you're watching the news very closely, it's like a bit of a tsunami. You can see the tide going out, and then you sort of think, well, when is the wave going to come back in? And so we were continuously watching this, not just from our own point of view, but from a real estate industry point of view, wondering, how it was all going to play out. When the real estate industry gets nervous, because we deal with real estate industry advertisers get nervous. That's our primary source of revenue. And so it did feel very rocky for a while there while nobody knew what was happening and what was going on. Just little things like whether we'd be able to do open for inspections, whether auctions would be on. And now we find, without dating this much, is that they almost called a trading halt on real estate, period. Yeah. Which is just would have been, much worse than what actually happened. But I listened to this great podcast with Seth Godin. And he said, if you're trying to feel like you're on dry land at the moment, stop it, because you're just going to feel seasick. The waves, while you're at sea, you got to go with the waves. Whatever comes at you, just go with it. And so I suppose we adopted that approach. I had more conversations with random people than I've ever had. One of my other mentors, Perry Marshall, he was quite adamant. He said, run into the chaos. And I think that was a good message for real estate agents as well, because in running into the chaos and helping other people, generally you're going to come out the other side okay. So put yourself last, put the customer first, and just run into the chaos. And that's what we did, basically.
Yeah, I love it. I would imagine that you're an online product as well as a magazine, but your online traffic, I imagine, would have gone through the roof because people were looking for content.
Yeah, all publishers, from us to Facebook to News Limited to, everyone reported this massive spike in traffic with no real way to monetize it, which was a bit ironic in those circumstances. It was a really interesting time too, in that people were hitting our site constantly, hungry for information. And it was just like that thing that you couldn't take your eyes off.
Did you have to curate more content, or were people happy to read what you were normally putting up there?
Interesting for us, we were about to press the print button on a magazine, which was our growth issue. And very quickly, we kind of pulled that back because putting something about growth out there while everyone was still gasping for air would have been completely tone deaf. So I took a breath and thought, what can I do to really help during this period? And started calling my mates, and we ran some webinars. And, I did a webinar with Hannah Gill and with Michael Sheargold and with John Cunningham and the REI heads, and just kept trying to put as much information out there as we could in a respectful way. It was odd. I wrote about it in my last editor's note. I hate being late, but I really had to just sort of press pause on that whole magazine thing while we worked out how we were going to help the industry through this tough period of time. I mean, obviously a month sort of went by, and then we were able to rearrange the content in the magazine so it was more timely appropriate. But yeah, that was probably one of the bigger pivots we've had to make in this magazine in our whole 5.5 years.
And I know that you're very good at looking at trends that are coming and say pivoting your business around that sort of stuff. So what are some of the trends that you perhaps saw pre-COVID, now that we've gone through the tsunami and the changes, and hopefully most states, unlike Victoria, most states are coming through it in a way that they probably didn't expect to. What are some of the trends you think we'll see coming out of it?
Yeah, well, pivot, precedented, and amidst are all drinking words for publishers now.
Yes.
but we're not there yet, right? Look, the trends that were coming out that I think will continue, and, I think that's the thing is COVID has actually stopped a lot of things in its tracks or accelerated them incredibly. So, for example, work from wherever was a trend coming into COVID, and now it's expected. So we're recruiting someone at the moment, and we put an ad on Seek the other day, and we're getting job applications from all over Australia and New Zealand that people expect to be able to work from home now.
I love that, because I hadn't even thought that was going to be the case, because doesn't that increase your talent pool as a business owner then all of a sudden?
Yeah, well, I started thinking about that. Like, this is where companies like EXP, who have their virtual online world, they have access to whatever talent pool they like. Like, they could hire the best IT person in Washington, and they could hire the best human resources person in California. And it doesn't matter, because they're business without borders, as we wrote in that story. And it's the same thing for all businesses now. Like, COVID has created an opportunity for us to think very differently about who we employ, because we've created ourselves a bit of a borderless way of operating in our businesses.
Do you think that some of the technology trends that you've seen, and look, I was one of these people who thought in the beginning when it all exploded, and we started doing virtual tours and virtual inspections, it was like, oh my God, this industry is moving 5 years ahead of its time. And then when we all settled down and looked at the reality of it, I kind of said, well, that's not true, because all this was available to us beforehand. We made the business choices in our businesses not to use it.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? Do you think that when we come out of this in 6 months' time, in 12 months' time, are you going to have a whole pile of businesses stay where they are and go, well, we caught up and we're really happy being here? Or are we as an industry going to continue moving forward?
That's a really interesting question, because I think some people, like I asked the question of quite a few people that I interviewed during that time, is there anything you would continue that you've adopted during this COVID period, or anything that you think is a good thing? And some forward-thinking leaders are saying yes, like, for example, let's take the virtual inspections, for example. I was on a judging panel for realestate.com.au last year, the Real Ideas Prize, and somebody got up and said, let's get tenants to do their own inspections. and we all laughed, like we all said, no, that'll never happen. And we gave the prize to someone else. And look at what's happened. Yeah. And there are some property management businesses around at the moment who are actually getting tenants to do their own inspections, but they've actually been able to save resources. So the owners have had no impact, because they're still getting their 4 inspections a year, but it's lessened the headcount on the property management business and therefore made them more profitable. So it depends on how you look at it. If you're going through COVID going, oh, I can't wait to get back to, whatever was normal, then what have you learned? You've missed an opportunity.
Yeah, I like that. It's funny because in Melbourne at the moment, we're in June. So just to date this conversation, we're on the 24th of June. We've had an increase of cases in Melbourne. And just this morning, I walked into my business, my property management business, and said to the team, right, in the areas that we have high cases of COVID, we're back to doing virtual routine inspections, change everything. And it was the ability for us to pivot our businesses in a second, make that decision and not even think about it. And I think we need to do more of that moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of people were sort of caught. I don't want to sound like we could see this coming because none of us could, but things that we thought were optional, like moving to the cloud, online auctions, letting people work from home, all of that sort of stuff where everyone was like, no, we're just going to keep a handle on it here and stick our heads in the sand. I think what COVID has taught us is that, if it does happen again, like the mini second wave that's happening in Victoria now, is that when you're prepared for these events, it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah. A question that's been running in my mind a little bit, and I'd love to get your opinion on it. I think there was a time when in real estate we all thought it's going to be a piece of technology that's going to change our world, rock real estate, whether it's property management or sales, it doesn't really matter. It was going to rock our world. And I get the impression now, the more and more I talk to different people, not just in real estate, but in corporate Australia and just around the country and around the world, actually, it seems to be becoming more and more obvious to me that it is going to be the types of leadership that comes out of this and how closely we connected to providing employees that preferred work environment where there is a different rhythm, there is a better balance, and leadership comes from the heart and kindness rather than what we've had before. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree 100%. The leaders that have managed to inspire their teams through this period, I think could inspire their teams through anything. Like we had Ewan Morton in here a couple of weeks ago, and he's got 8 offices around Sydney, and he was saying that he didn't specifically do anything, but it was just him being there, where people could sort of have him visible and see him and have access to talk to him. Like sometimes it was just having conversations and, as you say, being kind, so important.
Now, let's delve back into your past a little bit, Sam. You weren't always in magazines and real estate. In fact, when I first met you, you were with PwC, weren't you, at the time?
I was, actually.
Yes. You worked for brands like Optus and Cisco and British Telecom and PwC. What made you make the leap into real estate magazine?
I know, right? So, at the time I was at PwC, but I was a single mother, and I think, it's reasonably well documented that I'd been through a very painful separation and I actually needed a second job. So I worked for a real estate magazine it was my side hustle back before side hustles were even cool, but I just really loved it. And I suppose it went from there. I met a lot of people in the industry while I was writing for that magazine. It was a creative outlet. I enjoyed the real estate industry for its entrepreneurial feel, I guess. And I was ready to sort of bust out and do something else. But, obviously the best laid plans. It took me a while to come out of that and actually have my own business a couple of years later. Yeah.
I like the way you called it a side hustle, because it was a little bit. At some point you made the decision to buy the magazine and, move into the ownership. And I remember having a phone call with you. Actually, it's one of those phone calls that you have and you distinctly remember. I was about to drive onto the freeway and you called me and you said, hey, this is what I'm thinking of doing. And we had a discussion. And I think a lot of women or a lot of entrepreneurs have the doubts and they have so many questions about why they should be doing it or why they shouldn't be doing it. What were your concerns at the time and what did you do to overcome them and go, you know what, I'm doing this because this is the right thing to do?
Well, I remember back then too. And see, the thing is, I suppose, if we go back to Sold magazine, like I really loved working for that magazine. And I guess in terms of print and publishing and things like that, like Sold didn't have a very solid digital arm. It came up against a very solid competitor in the guys across the road. And, you really, as a publisher, even in real estate, you need a multiple channel revenue strategy, so that when one's good, another one might not be so good. And when one's not so good, another one might be good. Yeah, so going into a business that had just spectacularly failed. And so I didn't buy the business. I I swapped my debt for a website, rebranded it, went back to the corporate world, and then came back again about a year later when I was ready and thought I had I didn't have my ducks in a row. I was sitting at ARIC and, it was one of those rah-rah speakers that kind of got everyone on their feet, and I was sitting there taking notes for John McGrath. And then I hit the tweet button. I was so inspired by the whole thing that I said, all right, Elite Agent Magazine is going to be in print by September 15, 2015, I think it was, when I planned to have tweet, hashtag real estate, because you can't tweet without a hashtag, right? Anyway, that was it. It was out there then.
You put it out there and then you had to do it.
Yeah, and that was basically how it happened. And as Ida Buttrose says, you don't need to see the whole staircase, take the first step. And so I took the first step, but it was enough to make me think, okay, now I need to follow through on this.
Mm. And so then you moved into it full time, and it's a big risk, isn't it? Because I'm assuming you left a paying job and you've moved into a magazine.
I still didn't move into it full time. I was still contracting as a bid manager to Next Gen at the time. No stranger to having two jobs. And pretty much that was how it was for about a year. I was still doing freelance gigs while we were setting up the magazine, if you like. But, the thing is I started showing up consistently, like I'd actually sort of put it out there that was what I wanted. Yes, I was scared. I was a single mother and all of that sort of stuff. So I think my daughter was in year 6, so not the best time to go taking major risks. But, yeah, it was head down and bum up and worked really hard until, I got the desired result, which was a box of magazines on my doorstep a day before I said I would.
Excellent. I love the mindset that I imagine you would have been in because, you're doing 2 jobs, you're a single mum, you've got a 6-year-old at home. You would have had a lot of doubts in your head around, am I making the right decision? How am I going to put food on the table? How is this going to work? I've got money flowing out the door around this sort of stuff. How did you keep yourself focused and motivated on that goal that you wanted?
Well, see, this is where the real estate industry is actually really good because when you're writing about real estate, there's no shortage of a motivational coach to pick you up and get you moving. And so I consider myself very lucky that the lessons that I had learned over the period of time writing about real estate and continuing to write about real estate, sometimes we joke about how many coaches there are out there and how much education is out there. If we rewind back to Optus, I would have loved to have had that coaching when I was in sales back in that world. But, I guess the thing is, there's a few lessons I had in my head. Forward is one, no matter how big or small. Like some days were just, I'm never going to be able to do this. And other days was like, yeah, we made massive leaps forward. I just tried to be kind to myself, really. Like I knew that there would be days that, we'd get tired and there would be days that my other job would have to take precedence and days that your family's got to take precedence. But these days I call that tilting. Like a lot of women say juggling. I don't like that word because it implies off balance. But if you're intentional about today I'm focusing on this, the next day I'm focusing on that, it's much better mentally to cope with.
I like that. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. Would you have done anything different if you had your time again?
Yeah, well, I think, as you said before, like I was quite paralysed by fear, and I think I had a few people in the industry who are quite well known who didn't want me to succeed. In fact, like I can remember after I tweeted that and walked back into the ARIC Expo Hall, I bumped into someone I knew and said, guess what, I'm going to print a magazine of my own. And he said, well, what do you want to do that for? And, and I thought, great, good chat. Thanks very much. I'll
Mental
see.
note, you'll never appear in my magazine again.
yeah, good chat. See you later. And then sort of turned around and kind of, started that heavy breathing thinking, holy shit, what have I done? But the thing is you can't listen to that stuff, because there are people that, unfortunately, it's not even about you. It's more about them.
They're dream takers, aren't they? And they take the oxygen out of the room sometimes.
It's either that or they could take the step themselves that they want to take and then, and you've just taken it. So that's a bit of a threat.
Do you think the traditional real estate model is under threat, and how do you see it changing?
It depends what you define as a traditional model. Like, do I think that there'll be an intermediary between buyers, sellers, people, tenants, landlords to continue? Yes, I do. And I think that's another thing that COVID has proven. Like at the moment, I think anyone that wants to manage their own property, with all the stuff going on with eviction moratoriums and extra sanitisation requirements and inspections and all that sort of thing, there is no way I want to do that myself right now.
Yeah.
And the same with selling. I want a professional in there. Do I think the role of the real estate agent will change? Yes, I do. Like I think that there'll be some consolidation because of price pressure on fees and things like that. And we've seen that coming for a few years now. But actually, you know what? I said I was going to stop predicting the future after COVID. But I think there'll be other opportunities. And I think the clue to the future of real estate comes looking at Gen Z. So, Gen Z, for example, they're digital natives. They will want to work from wherever. I sort of thought that co-living was taking off as a trend, but maybe not so much anymore. I think, they might stay at home for a bit longer. But let's say someone from Gen Z goes out and buys a property. They're not going to want to go and buy a whole stack of furniture, for example, because they might want to move somewhere else, or they might want to move to a regional area because they will expect now post-COVID that they can work from wherever. And so, I think some of the clues are in there, and I actually think that there's an opportunity for agents almost to create their own marketplaces and engage the community that way.
Yeah, and I think also it allows them to quite easily now work outside their marketplaces to a large extent, particularly in property management. We've done that in our business where we've got a rent roll that's about 30 k's away from us right now. We don't even think twice about getting properties out there because we've got a property manager who lives out there, and it's easy for her to work from home part-time, come in the office part-time and manage that portfolio out there. So I think in some ways we can think broader than my local marketplace. In other ways we can become hyper-local, and it's kind of the best of both worlds, which is really cool.
I think so too. And I think why not maybe take advantage of some of the neighbours to help you with inspections to help let people in.
Now, that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, the thing to look out for, and again, this is a Gen Z thing, it's hard to imagine Gen Z dealing with a repair that it takes more time than an Airtasker and an Uber to do. Because they can get on their phones and they can order an Airtasker and they can order an Uber and have that, that shower head replaced pretty much immediately. But how do you beat that? Or do you join them?
Yeah, you got to join them, don't you? And I think client expectation is going to drive a lot of the changes our industry will see in the future. You write a lot of stories in your magazine. How do you decide what are you going to write and who you're going to write on, I guess, or interview?
Yeah, good question. We have themes throughout the year, and the upcoming issue, for example, is spring selling. So everything will be geared towards, revving people up for that spring season. Hopefully everything stays on an even keel as, no more COVID and things like that. But people wonder how we define elite agent when they see certain people in the magazine. But basically, we're looking for good humans that are less concerned for their own PR, but more concerned with educating others. And so we do get approached by a lot of people that, just want pure PR, and now we make them pay for it.
That's a good idea. I like that.
Which is fine, but, and this is good advice for any publisher you're approaching. So, I know agents listening to this might want to get into the Domain magazine or news.com.au featured pages and things like that. Always go at the editor with what can you deliver to their audience. They're always looking for something different or something educational or something that is in line with whatever theme that they're putting forward. And as soon as you say a few words, here's how I think it can help your audience, here's my bio and mugshot all ready for you, high res, here's photos of the story that I want to publish. And the fifth one would be exclusive. So, because I think the days of PR people just typing something up and hitting send on a press release, they're over. That's not what we're looking for.
No. And the ability to be slightly different, isn't it? Because, I don't know about you, but I see so many people, interest rate changes, and every man and his dog sends an email to you or puts something on Facebook about interest rates haven't changed. It's yeah, we already know that,
Yeah. Spoiler alert, they're probably not going to change for another 12 months.
Yeah, exactly. So how do agents actually create really good relationships with their local newspapers and journos? Do you have any tips around that?
I think, you'd be surprised how few friends we actually have. So it's really just watching the papers and watching what people are publishing and then thinking, well, how can I stick my own spin on that? We wrote an article, I think a couple of years ago, 19 ways to attract the press, and I'll give you a link for it for your show notes. But there are multiple ways you can do it. But I imagine you look at the stories being published, you look at the journalist byline, you look them up on LinkedIn, connect, and then say, hey, I saw you publish this story on this. I've got an idea for a story on that, and I'm all lined up, as I said before, with, photos and all that sort of thing. Do you mind if I send it to you as an exclusive? Exclusive. That's the key word. And there's no journo that would say no to that.
Say no, because you've just made it so easy for them as well, haven't you? So, yeah. Do you see your magazine purely being online moving forward?
I think there'd be an uproar if we took away the print magazine. But, with the month delay that we had in April, May, we've decided to only do 4 issues this year and run with the seasons, sort of like Vogue, spring, summer, autumn, winter. It may be that we stay like that, but we've actually got another product called Extra, which I don't have in front of me, where we do all the show notes from all of our podcasts. Again, because I think it's like, agents really want to cut through the noise of maybe I don't want to listen to 6 hours of podcasts every month. Just give me the crib notes. And so do you remember back when we were at school how, some of us didn't want to read the whole Shakespeare?
Yep.
And there were these things called Cliff's Notes, which would get you through Shakespeare in 5 minutes. Well, that's what Extra is.
Right. Okay.
And so we send that out as just a normal A4, not a glossy magazine, but people love that because they can scribble on it. And
good idea.
implement ideas and things like that. So, moving forward, we see ourselves as curators as well as creators. Like, I don't believe in adding to the noise unnecessarily. I'd rather help agents cut through the noise to get to what they need quickly and be able to either think about it or act on it as necessary.
So you've got the magazine online and in print. You've got your podcast. Is there anything else that's in the pipeline?
Oh, there's all sorts of stuff. So there's Street MBA, which we started last year, some small group tours. So a lot of agents actually, it's different to a big event. Like, people tend to talk at you at a big event. Whereas with Street MBA, we take small groups, 8 people at a time, into different best practice offices outside home state. And that was so much fun last year, just doing these little tours. We've sort of been thinking about employment in the future as well. And we've created this site called Design Your Tribe. And basically, we think that post-COVID, people are going to want access to really super qualified resources. So let's just call it the Fiverr of real estate. And so we're going to put a lot of focus into that in the next 12 months. You can't take the entrepreneur out of the girl, unfortunately.
No, you can't. I do love those ideas. And I do know some people who've been on your MBA tour and they've just loved it. I don't know how you get on it, whether you pre-select them or they apply. I don't know what the process is, but whatever the process is, they need to do it.
We paused ticket sales for a while because of COVID, but we'll be back on the street again in February next year.
Where do you see yourself or your business or both in 5 years?
That's a really good question. I'm sure we'll still be here in some way, shape or form, but the real estate industry changes so quickly that, who knows? I see us continuing to create content. We've just done another round of Transform, actually, which I've really, really loved. So, I'd love to be adding more value in that sense again in 5 years' time. I don't know, 5 years is a long time, isn't it?
It's a long time, isn't it? Yeah, and it's probably unfair to say 5 years, maybe 3 years. Tell me about Transform. That's one thing we haven't spoken about, and I know that a couple of our agents have gone through the program, and again, they've just raved about it. What is that about?
And this was one of our responses to COVID is for 30 days, we give people different lessons on, whether it's digital marketing or prospecting or, all the things that you need as a great real estate agent. But we put a real focus on digital because, again, agents need to get themselves above the noise. We had a take back the narrative as a theme. Like, a lot of agents will complain about the mainstream media saying property prices are going to fall 30%, but, and it's not happening out in the burbs. And we know it's not happening out in the burbs, but what are they doing about it? Complaining. So there was a big focus of ours to go, okay, let's all get comfortable on video. Let's start doing market updates. Let's really start monitoring our market. Let's start looking at days on market. And now on Saturday, you're going to get on video and you're going to tell the people in your marketplace what's really going on. You're going to deliver good news. Among other things, like we deal with mindset and habits and things like that. So it was really great and really refreshing to see the property managers. You'll be pleased to know they did really well.
Good.
And out of the top 12, 11 were women.
Even better.
So, sort of proving that they've got, because it's a tough challenge. It is the Tough Mudder boot camp of real estate challenges, because it's not just about listening to someone. It's actually, we say, right, you've heard this now go implement.
What is your advice to women who have the entrepreneurial urge in them? So to actually go out and do it, having done it yourself, and not the most easiest way, what's your advice to them?
This is standard advice, I suppose, but I would say trust your gut no matter how scared you are. And I'll tell you a story. Like back at university, I did really well in entrepreneurship and innovation. And for our final assignment, we had to say what sort of a business we would create given half the chance. Now, I was 22, I think, because I'd done my degree part-time and very unsure of myself. I put together this assignment because I was living by myself in this little studio flat in North Sydney. It was all I could afford. I hated buying a full loaf of bread because I could only ever use half in a week. And so I thought, why don't people cater for one person? Like you could literally, and why am I eating, McDonald's again because it's too expensive to go and buy the ingredients to make myself a proper meal? I thought, wouldn't it be great if you could buy one onion and one leek and one potato and one, so that you could make yourself potato and leek soup. And so that was my project. I put that whole thing together, the whole assignment, and back then it was 1994, I think, and the internet wasn't as big as it is now. It was, I believe in the internet now. It's a thing.
It is a thing.
Anyway, so I put this whole thing together about how people would want to create their own meals rather than buying something packaged or something takeaway. Everyone, I got a high distinction for the assignment. Everyone's like, wow, that's amazing. You have to do that. You have to do that. And I was way too scared, way too young, way too green. I was thinking, geez, I'd have to raise a lot of money for it. Who would I talk to? All the questions went through my head. Anyway, fast forward to now and look at all the companies that do that, HelloFresh and, all of those companies. And it was just really my idea with the internet thrown in the middle. But I had zero confidence in myself that I could do it. And the thing is, and, you watch people in Transform and, they come in unconfident and come out confident. We're all better than we think we are. We can be our own worst enemies. And I think, if you're passionate enough about something, and if you really feel it in your gut, then trust your gut, but follow through, keep showing up.
Yes, I like that. Follow through and keep showing up. My last question to you, what would you tell your younger self?
Don't get a perm. That's the first thing that came to mind. What would I tell my younger self? I would say it's going to be okay. There might be a few ups and downs in your life, but ultimately, it'll work out.
Yeah, sun will come up and you'll get out of bed and you'll keep going.
Yeah, absolutely.
I like that. Samantha, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure talking to you. I don't know how strange it's been for you to be on the other side, but I hope you've enjoyed yourself. It's certainly been really interesting listening to your story, and I hope our listeners have found the same. It's always nice to listen to the story of the person who does the interviews most of the time.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to when I can ask you the questions.
Well, I think I'm busy washing my hair or something. I'm a bit like you. It's no, I like asking the questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's my comfort zone. But no, thank you so much. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to get in touch.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Elevate from Elite Agent. To download your written action guide from this podcast containing extra tips, links and shortcuts, visit eliteagentelevate.com.